Back before my girlfriend Jenny and I officially started dating, we would still hang out all the time. We both snowboard, and her family has a little cabin-type house in Vermont not far from Stowe Mountain Resort. This was around our maybe 10th time hanging out. She invited me to go up there for a weekend with her, to go snowboarding for the first time together. It was like a 5-hour drive as we mirrored her little house. We spent about half an hour on this very windy, secluded road on which we'd pass occasional driveways that would lead up into properties blocked off by walls of trees. We were way up there in the mountains. The sight of other cars by this point was something to behold. It really felt like we were alone up there. A lot of the driveways didn't even have tire marks in the snow, meaning even a lot of the houses were void of people. Jenny told me that's because a lot of the houses here were owned by people out of state, just like her situation. I was going like 30 when she yelled at me to slow down. It's coming up, so I hit the brakes, and this little opening in the trees that I otherwise would have missed came up. We drove this narrow trail in 4-wheel drive, which led to the small house covered in snow. It looked incredibly cozy. We parked, and first thing we did was turn the heat on in the little house. We unloaded our stuff inside, and since it was already getting dark that night, we just cooked some of the food we packed for dinner and watched a movie. Pursuit of Happiness, actually. So the house had just about everything: heat, electricity, except running water. Her family had jugs and jugs of water for important things like washing hands and plates and stuff, but there was no working toilet, so she told me we had to use the outhouse outside. I only had to go pee that night, so I just went out to the front deck and peed into the snow. It was also snowing out that night. We fell asleep at some point during the second movie we watched, and we woke up pretty early to our phone alarms. We wanted the freshies on the mountain. We started getting ready to drive up to the ski resort. After breakfast, I had to go out to the outhouse, though I ran out to the outhouse in my shoes and my feet started to freeze. On my way to the outhouse, though, I saw footprints in the snow. They were kind of big, but I couldn't tell if they were boot marks or animal prints. I followed the trail, and it actually wrapped around the house and then went into the woods. I called Jenny outside, and she came to look and said it was probably a black bear since they're everywhere up here. So I went, did my business, and we set off to the ski resort, where we had a good 8-hour run. Afterwards, we stopped at a diner to eat and then went back to the house. By this point, it was pitch black outside and snowing again. We set up a fire and got the heat on full blast and started blasting some music. We started to drink, and eventually I had to break the seal and pee, but also if I was throwing my boots on anyway, I figured I'd do all my business in the outhouse. I ran out into the snowstorm and to the outhouse once more. This time I slammed the door shut to prevent snow and cold air blowing in my face. I heard the blasting music from inside the house still, but then over that I heard the crunching sound of footsteps in the snow passing the outhouse. Jenny, I yelled. No answer. Footsteps just walked away. I brought my phone with me, so I just texted her, "Are you outside?" It didn't immediately deliver though, because my cell reception sucked up there. A few minutes passed and I was still in the outhouse. I was just about to finish when the blasting music suddenly stopped. It was just pure silence, minus the sound of snowflakes hitting the ground outside. As soon as I stepped out of the outhouse, I realized it was pitch black out here now. The lights from the house were off. I figured maybe the power went out. I use my phone's flashlight and noticed a fresh pair of footsteps in the snow, leading to the house. I followed the footsteps to the front door. They seemed to stop then continue around the house. I banged on the door and yelled Jenny's name. Suddenly the door opened and an arm pulled me inside the house. It was Jenny. She slammed the door shut and locked it. She whispered that there was a man who tried to open the door, which she locked. As soon as I went to the outhouse, because she was scared being alone, when she saw the person at the door wasn't me, she cut the power and hid in the corner in the living room and watched in horror as a stranger walked past the living room window slowly, looking inside. I came to the door only a couple minutes after this happened. Jenny told me about the secret cellar in the floor that her dad kept a couple rifles and shotgun in. Navigating in the dark, I found the handle to it and lifted it open. Now, using my flashlight, I climbed down the little ladder and grabbed one of the guns off the wall. We then waited on the couch in the dark, afraid to turn the lights back on, exposing ourselves to whoever was out there. The closest neighbors were not a short walk. Jenny said it wouldn't have been any of them, and odds are they weren't. Even in Vermont right now, once again the only sound was the sound of snowflakes hitting the ground outside, until the sickening sound of footsteps. In the snow outside returned. I took the loaded gun and marched to the front door, opened it and shot like 3 rounds into the air, screaming. The footstep sounds were gone. I'd imagine they ran off, and the sound of the shots echoing into the air masked the sound of the footsteps running away. We left the next morning under the recommendation of her father, who said it's best to not be there at the moment. They don't really have anything there, worried about being stolen, so we just got the hell out of there the next day. At least we got our full day of snowboarding, and that horrific night was definitely an experience, to say the least. I live in England, and for others who live here, you may remember it snowed quite a lot in the winter of 2018. I used to love the snow, but after what happened, I'm no longer a fan of it. My immediate family was going to visit extended family in Cornwall for the weekend. I didn't want to go. I don't get along with them very well and would much rather have stayed at home, so I faked an illness. I wasn't expecting it to work, but it did. They went without me and left me in charge of the house, which I was fine with. For the record, I was 16, so it's not like they were being irresponsible. Saturday was great. I went on my computer and watched Netflix and played in the snow with my dog for a bit. She loves the snow more than anything. That evening I was just finishing up a mission on Call of Duty World War II when I started to get hungry. The house is full of food, but mostly food that takes a lot of effort to prepare. I decided to go to the fish and chip shop in the village. By now, it was getting dark outside and the snow had stopped falling, but it had gotten really deep. I grabbed a tenner and crammed it into my pocket before pulling on a coat and heading outside. The route I take involves going down a tree-lined snicket that has a few street lamps for light before coming out near the main road where the chippy is. By the time I got there, it was dark out. I got some chips, battered sausage, and started to head back home. I was halfway down the snicket, clutching my meal, when I heard it in the trees just to my right. The twig snaps. My head whipped around, but I couldn't see anything. My heart was racing, but I tried to convince myself it was just an animal. So I heard it again, 2 snaps in rapid succession. Now I was scared. I began to walk home fast. I forgot about what was coming up the last section of the snicket, which was almost pitch black. The bulb in the street lamp had blown months ago, and the council couldn't be bothered to fix it. I sighed. with frustration and worry, and carried on, walking. Before I heard it, the continuous sound of twigs breaking stopped for a moment before being replaced by crunching. I stopped and turned around, and my heart stopped. I could see a black figure silhouetted by the lamp further down the snicket, a black figure who was running straight at me. I turned around and full on sprinted through the snow. I burst out of the snicket and ran to my house, which was only about 10 meters away. I got my keys out as I was running, and I jammed them into the lock. As soon as I was close enough, I threw myself into the house and slammed the door shut behind me, locking it. I looked out of the window and saw nothing. Streets were deserted. It wouldn't be that bad if it ended there, but it didn't. Paranoia kept me up late, and close to midnight the dog started making a racket, barking and scratching at the back door. I knew deep down what she was barking at, but I didn't want to believe it. I went to the back door, but it was too dark to see anything. I steeled my nerves and flicked the light switch to once again see nothing. The back garden was empty. I dragged the dog away from the door and went back to watching TV, but something was nagging me. I couldn't think what it was. The back garden was undisturbed apart from my footsteps leading up to the back door from when I came home. That's when it hit me. I came in the front door. My veins turned to ice, and as I walked to the back door, I realized something was very wrong. I could feel cold air on my face. Walked around to it and stopped dead. It was wide open. The build of my house gives 3 different options when you enter the house: the living room where I was, kitchen, or stairs. As I slowly backed into the wall, I heard a light but clear thump upstairs. With that, I grabbed the dog, grabbed my phone, and ran straight to the neighbors. And due to it being midnight, I rang the bell about 10 times before getting a response. They were furious about being woken, but when I told them what was going on, they let me straight in. The police took about 40 minutes to arrive because of the snow that was once again falling heavily, and when they did come, they did a thorough search of the house. You found nothing. The footsteps were all filled in by the snow, but this showed a figure running straight out of the back door soon after I left, and hopping the fence at the end, they disappeared into the woods. Bahai. Behind my house. Kills me to know he's still out there, and that he knows where I live. I'm sleeping more steadily now, and we have a new lock on the door, and while I was constantly worried for me and my family's safety.